morning.
Good morning.
It's nice to have you here, and it's actually a cloudy enough day. You can see both screens quite well, and I don't really have a PowerPoint at all, so that's how that always goes, right? Well, we've been looking at the people, and we moved up through Abraham, and Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph. But today, I'm not really going to jump into Moses. We'll just touch a little bit on him, but I want to focus on the people that we don't normally talk about. And that would be his siblings. His mom, and his wife. Who here even knows any of them? Well, hopefully you at least know his brother, Aaron, because he becomes the high priest for all generations will come after him. And Miriam, his sister, is the one who watches over him, and she becomes a prophetess. She's actually right along with Aaron. So we're going to kind of just poke around. There's so much. So no, I'm not going to stand here and read 4 books of the Bible today. I'm just going to read one chapter in Numbers. And we'll just kind of pick a little bit through, because hopefully you know the stories. But we're going to look at Numbers chapter 12. This is after they've been rescued from Pharaoh and his army, and they're in the wilderness, and after a lot of stuff's gone on, Moses is married, and he marries an Ethiopian woman, but she's the daughter of a priest. So picking up at chapter 12, it says, "Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. So they said, 'Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also?' And the Lord heard it. Now the man of Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, 'Come out, you 3, to the tabernacle of meeting.'" That's with an exclamation mark too. So the 3 came out. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle. And he called Aaron and Miriam, and they both went forward. Then he said, "Hear now my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly and not in dark sayings. And he sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" So the anger of the Lord was aroused against them, and he departed. And when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, white as snow. Then Aaron turned toward Miriam, and there she was, a leper. So Aaron said to Moses, "Oh, my Lord, please do not lay this sin on us in which we have done foolishly, and in which we have sinned. Please do not let her be as one dead, whose flesh is half consumed when she comes out of her mother's womb." So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "Please heal her, O God, I pray." Then the Lord said to Moses, "If her father had but spit in her face, would she not be shamed for 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp for 7 days, and afterwards she may be received again." And afterward the people moved from Heroth and encamped in the wilderness of Paran. This is the scripture reading. Thanks be to God. Well, I said we're going to just kind of pick around a little bit with Moses and Exodus, but it's not so much Moses, it's his family members, but it's what's transpired that's caused the other stories to happen. So we know that when Moses was born, there was something going on in Egypt. If you remember, we talked about Abraham, and God told Abraham in a dream that what? His generations would in 400 years be enslaved to Egypt. And that's exactly what happened. So 400 years has gone by. And the Israelites have grown up, and there are so many now. They are just overrunning. And Pharaoh's starting to get worried. And so he sends out an edict that all the baby boys should be killed. But the girls can live. Now here's the thing, they didn't have Egyptian midwives, they had Hebrew midwives, and they didn't go along with what Pharaoh said. So they were delivering babies anyway. And when Pharaoh asked and brought them in to find out why they had not been killing the babies. He said, oh, well, you know what? The Hebrew women are just so vivacious. They're just popping these kids out before we can even get there. And so we're not there to do that. And so then he sends out another edict. Now, I would say this is divine intervention because Moses' mother takes one look at Moses and knows there's something special, and I think God had talked to her. Because instead of killing him, she decides to hide him. Now, here's another divine intervention. If you've ever had a baby, how much can you keep that baby quiet for 3 months? Especially not if it's a colicky baby. So there had to have been a lot of divine protection over this little guy, because she hides him for 3 months, it says, until she can't hide him any longer. And then she wonders what she's going to do, and again, I would say divine intervention, because God gives her a plan. This is not just any plan. Now, if you've read any of the books or you've seen the stuff, what do we think? Oh, she put him in a basket and she stuck him in the Nile, and there's rapids and there's crocodiles and there's all this stuff, and God just happens to save him. Well, that's really not how it went down at all. It makes good movies, but that's not how it went. So on the Nile, where the Pharaoh was at, there was an area right in front that was kind of partitioned off, and that's where they went and they bathed. And she knew this, and she knew that the Pharaoh's daughter came down probably every day or every other day, whenever, and she bathed in this particular spot. So she chose that day to put her little boy in that basket, and she had Miriam go, and she put him in the reeds right there where she knew the Pharaoh's daughter would see him. And then she hid and watched. She paid attention. Her mom said, you take care of that baby boy as though it's your life, and she did. Well, of course, what happens? We know the story. The Pharaoh's daughter sees him, hears him, and she has her maidservant go get him. She brings him. Now, she sees that he's the Hebrew baby. Now, think about this. She knows the edict of her dad. All Hebrew babies should be drowned in the Nile River. She's in the Nile River. She could have flipped the basket over, but she didn't. Another divine intervention. She decides, of all the babies that she can adopt, she's going to adopt this Hebrew baby. But she also knows he's 3 months old. How am I going to nurse him? And so it's at that time that the angel nudges Miriam, and she pops up and she goes, I know somebody that can nurse him. And she goes, you say God has got a sense of humor and provision. Not only does he give Moses back to his mother, but she pays him to feed him and take care of him. Think about that. So she keeps him until he's of weaning age, which could be anywhere from 3 to 5. That they don't know exactly the dates on this. But it means he would have known his family. So Miriam was the oldest. Aaron was 3 years older than Moses. And then we have Moses. And they grow up together for those few years, and then he goes back to Pharaoh's daughter. And she raises him in the palace as though he's her own. So he knows the Egyptian ways. In fact, he works his way up kind of in the ranks. Well, you all know the rest of the story. What happens? The Bible just skips right from there to when he's about 40 years old. It says he kind of discovers that now he remembers again that he's Hebrew, and he starts having this stirring in his heart and his soul. I would say it would be God. He sees an Egyptian beating a fellow Israelite, and instead of going over and smacking him or using the Egyptian law or something like that, he kills him, and then he hides the body. He thinks he got away with it. But a couple days later, he's out walking around, and he sees 2 Israelites fighting, and he goes over to them, and he says, why are you fighting against each other? And they look at him, knowing that he killed somebody, and said, who are you? Our brother? We're going to rat on you. And he gets so nervous and so worried because the news travels back to Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, I'm going to kill you. He takes off. So at 40 years old, his whole world that he's ever known, he leaves and he goes and runs into the desert. While he's on his way into the desert, he runs into a group of guys by a well that were not letting some girls water their sheep. Now there was a man by the name of Jethro who was a priest. He was an Ethiopian priest, and he had some daughters, and Zipporah happened to be one of them at the well. And so Moses, wanting to show off, he runs off the guys and he waters their sheep for them. And Zipporah goes home and her dad goes, how come you're back so soon? And she says, well, this good-looking guy just saved us over there and he watered our sheep. But he says, well, bring him in for a meal. Isn't that what we do? Bring him in. You got a good-looking guy, we want to bring him home, bring him in for a meal. I'm going to hook you up. And that's exactly what he does, and he gives the Torah to Moses to marry. So he's in his 40s. Another 40 years goes by. So he's now been under the tutelage of a priest of God. He hasn't known God for 40 years, really. But now he gets to know him. He gets to know the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And then, while he is out with the sheep, he hears something. A voice from the most unexpected places, a bush. But not any bush, a burning bush. And it is there that God talks to him. And God tells him what he wants him to do. And he goes, yeah, no, that's not my thing. I don't speak very good. I'm sure I got a stutter. You ever done that? Have you ever felt like God was calling you to do something and you started making a checklist of all the reasons why you were not qualified to do it? I should have worn my shirt. I got a shirt that says God qualifies. He doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. God's saying, no, I have chosen you. But when Moses puts up this little fit, finally God, I can just hear him like any parent, a big sigh, and he says, okay, well, what about your brother Aaron? The Levite. Oh, here's a clue. Anybody catch that? His mom was a Levite, his dad was a Levite, so here we have Aaron from the tribe of Levi. And he makes that point. God says, here comes your brother Aaron, the Levite. I know he can speak well, and he's already on his way to meet you. Now, okay, Aaron was in Egypt. Now, how he got away, I don't know. Moses is in the desert. Another divine appointment. Aaron is on his way to meet Moses. And so now the two are going to become the dynamic duo. They're going to hook up, and God's going to send them back to Egypt, to Pharaoh. Now it is Aaron who is now the spokesperson for Moses. Moses hears from God, but then he relays it to Aaron, and Aaron speaks. So they go to the Hebrews, and they tell him, hey, we have talked to God, our God that we have been worshiping for over 600 years. And this is what he says. He's going to redeem us, and he's going to free us. And they don't believe it until, of course, they do the signs. And then they go, yay! They're all behind them. Until you go to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says no. And then he gets mad and says, oh yeah, you're going to make the same amount of bricks, only this time you got to get your own straw. How do you think that went over? Oops. It didn't. Because now the Israelites hate them. Because it just made their life harder. And with each one, with each plague that God keeps doing, he's hitting the different gods of Egypt with every single plague. You know the story, right? The very last one, Passover. Did you realize that the whole point of Passover, we've been looking at all the places that Jesus had been popping in and out through all the Old Testament. And here we have it again. This is now the Passover supper. It is the sacrificial lamb. It is the blood on the doorpost. And I said if you were to walk down any road in the lane in their Jewish camp, and if you would have looked at all the doorposts, the way that the blood was put across, it would have looked like crosses all the way down. It was the firstborn son that would die. Jesus was the firstborn and only son, and it was his blood as the Passover lamb. So we see that he's there. We know that they get to leave, and they cross the river, and they come into the promised land, and it's after they cross the river that Miriam gets to come on the scene again, and she sings the song of Miriam, and it's part of what we did for our call to worship. Blessing God and praising God, and that song to this day is still sung by any Jewish person. They know it by heart. Why not to forget? Because of God's faithfulness and of his glory and of his holiness. You should read it. It's pretty cool. Then they get into the desert. They get see the promised land. God goes, here's your promised land. And they look, and they send spies, and they come back, and they go, there's giants! And they don't trust God. A God who's just done 10 plagues. A God who has just parted the Red Sea, and they walked on dry ground. Not mud, but dry ground. They get on the other side and they go, oh, God's not big enough for that. Let me ask you this. In your life, You know all the things. If you were to write down everything on a sheet of paper that God has ever done in your life, that He's answered a prayer, you probably have to flip that sheet over a couple times, right? But then, knowing all that, when God asks you to do something, to face something really, really tough, have you said, well, I know you did all that, but I don't think you're going to be able to do this. Or, I don't feel qualified. Or you picked the wrong person for the job. That's why God sends them into 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, because they didn't trust God. And they haven't known Him for over 400 years. When He wrestled with Jacob was the last time that God was on the scene. He has to build that relationship again. So for 40 years they're wandering. For 40 years God provides. They complain and they complain and He provides. And then we get to the part where He actually tells them, He gives them a decree. Now we think that the Ten Commandments didn't happen until He wrote them on stone, but actually God orally gives them the Ten Commandments, pretty much. But the first one, the main one that He tells them, do not make any graven images. Do not follow after the foreign gods. Do not. How many times have I got to say do not? As a parent, have you ever said that? Do not. And then He says, I love this, because in chapter 23, verse 20, He tells them, 23, He says, do not lie about people. This was the next one. Don't make false accusations about people. And then He says, do not follow the crowd when they are doing the wrong thing. Oh, how about if your friends jumped off a cliff, would you jump off too? Have you heard that one? Did you know that was scriptural? God said, don't fall into peer pressure. If everybody's deciding, I don't care if they're doing the wrong thing. Don't do it. Am I the only parent that's had that talk with my kids? I know that usually when you say don't, they what? Do. And if you just say don't, that's usually what happens. That's why my philosophy was always, this is the why you don't. Oh, you could do that, but this is what will happen. To the point that they go, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. Well, you would think, right? You would think that that's where they would be. Nope. But then God takes Aaron, and He says, I'm going to set you apart. Now they get into the part before the Ten Commandments. I want you to realize this. They had made a tabernacle, and they had made the Holy of Holies. And He set Aaron as the chief priest. And he had special garments that he had to wear. And at the bottom of his garment, he was supposed to put bells and pomegranates all the way around the hem. Why? Because when he was doing ministry, ding, 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 every time he walked, everybody heard it. Going in and going out. And God said, this may seem odd, but God said, you must do this every single time. If you do not, you will die. Would you like that if God gave you a command and said, even one that maybe you didn't understand, it didn't make sense? You know, I'm one of those, I'll follow the rules if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, I have a really hard time following the rules. But I think if God told me, do it or you'll die, I would go, okay, that's one, I'll just make an exception. Then He also gave him the breastplate. Now this breastplate wasn't any breastplate. It was heavy. And it had 12 stones on them for the 12 what? Tribes of Israel from Jacob. And inside, this is really kind of cool. I actually got to see a complete mock of what this looks like. Inside were two little pouches behind the breastplate. And there was Urim and Thummim. They were two stones. And He talked about God. He wasn't talking to Aaron, but in a way, He gave him an answer. Because you would put these stones in, one meant right, one meant wrong. And if somebody came before you and asked you a question, the one that, and it said, put this on so they are next to his heart. I love that. There's a connection to God. So you would come to the priest and you would ask him a question. He'd ask God, and whichever stone heated up, that was your answer. It was right or wrong. We see this later. David does the same thing. He goes into the chief chief priest with the ephod, and he gets the Urim and the Thummim because he wants to know if he needs to go into battle. Should I go or will we die? He wants an answer. This goes on throughout all of Scripture, but a lot of us miss it. So Aaron is a big deal. He's just been given the chief priest. He's the only one that can walk into the Holy of Holies. And where is that? That's where God resides, right? Oh, how powerful. And then in chapter 29, God says the priesthood is theirs by an everlasting ordinance. This wasn't until he died. This wasn't until he got to the promised land. This is what? Forever. So it's not just the Levitical the Levitical group. They are the priests. But then there's a special clan that's called the Kohan, out of all the Levites. And this Kohan tribe is the Levitical priests. So they are set apart. Did you know that that Kohan tribe still exists today? And you know, this is what's really, really cool. This put me on a quest. So when I went over to Israel the first time, even beforehand, I just had this I was told I was German. I had my whole history, you know, who it was, where it came from, Scotland, England, Germany. Or my grandma was Heinz 57. She had every country I think in her. But I just felt like I was Jewish. I don't know why. I just really, really felt it. It was from my dad. I just felt like I was Jewish, and not just any Jewish, but I really felt that I was from the Levitical tribe, and maybe the Kohan tribe. I could not find it. Could not find it anywhere. I went to Israel the first time, nothing. Came back. About a year or two afterwards, God all of a sudden just opened up all this genealogy that hadn't been there before. And guess what? My dad comes from Poland. There's a whole area there called Plok. But guess what? They're not Polish. They're Polish Jews. And they're not just any Polish Jews, but they're from the Levitical tribe. And they're not just from any Levitical tribe, but they're from the Kohan tribe. They moved from Israel to Poland, and then from Poland, World War II, they moved into Germany, and then from Germany moved to America. But see, in the 1980s, we didn't have all the genealogy stuff that we do now. So I got as far as Germany, and that was it. That's as far as it stopped. Does it really matter? Well, it kind of did to me. Just because I knew it. It was in my gut. And I say that because my dad was in the ministry, my brother's in the ministry, and it's just a feeling. But this was a big deal. It says, so theirs is an everlasting ordinance. And again, when much is given, what? Much is expected. So we see the parts of what God did. After all of this, now, God says to Moses, I want you to take you and Joshua and Aaron, and I want 70 of your elders, and I want you to come up the mountain, and I'm going to meet them. I'm going to have lunch. How would you like to have lunch with God? How would you like that invitation? I wonder if it's in calligraphy and Hebrew or what. They do. They go up the mountain, and they see his feet, they see his legs, and they dine with him, and they have lunch, and God talks with them. And then he tells the 70, you can't go any farther. But he tells Aaron and Joshua, you can come up. And so they go up farther on the mountain. They see his knees. He sees his thigh. And then, no, Aaron can't go any farther. And then it's Joshua. He can go a little farther. And then Moses says, okay, you got to stay here. And then Moses makes the rest of the ascension up into the mountain where he is with God. And it is there that he's there for 40 days. Now, this is an Israelite group, right? 70 of the elders just had lunch with him. And yet 40 days goes by and they go, we're never going to see Moses again. He's left us out here in the wilderness to die. God doesn't exist. How easy we turn our back on God. And it's during that time they convince Aaron, the chief priest, to make a golden calf. Think about that. What was the first thing that God said, don't? And then he tells Aaron, if everybody wants to go that way, don't follow. And what does Aaron say? Give me all your jewelry. And then he tells Moses, I don't know what happened. And just poof, the golden calf came out. Yeah, kids say that? I don't know what happened. It just showed up. So Moses gets so mad, he melts down the calf and he mixes the gold with the water and he makes them all drink it. remember. And then he goes, well, I should say when he was coming down, I missed that part. When he was starting to come down, because of the golden calf, God had given him the first set of 10 commandments, and that's when he throws them down and he breaks them, and then he has to go back up the mountain again to get another set of 10 commandments. But God had already told them orally what the commandment was before, but they didn't follow it. So now it's in stone. And he comes back down. And so this is where we get. They go all the way through. They've been in the wilderness. God's provided when they need it. He's given them water. He's given them food. No matter how much they complain, he has been there. He was there in a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day, walking them, being with them. And now in Numbers we read is when Miriam and Aaron start grumbling about Zipporah, Moses' wife. Have you ever had a conflict with an in-law? You ever had an in-law you didn't like? You ever had one that just rubbed you the wrong way? Maybe they came from the wrong side of the tracks. Maybe they came from the wrong town. Maybe they came from the wrong country. She was Ethiopian. You ever heard Dad's a high priest? No matter. She was Ethiopian. And they were grumbling. We know a little bit about Zipporah. We know that God used her to save Moses at a time before, doing something that was critical, that should have been done by his mom, but he wasn't circumcised. And the Lord came to kill him. But Zipporah, he woke her up. And she circumcised him and saved him. We know that much about Zipporah. But they grumbled. And what did God say? You three get out here now. Don't make me come down there. And he did. Set a pillar of smoke. Right there at the tent. You're done as a parent. And he tells them, who do you think you are? Because they were grumbling. Well, we're prophets too. Who died made you God. Yeah, God has a little bit of talking to. But then to make his point, what does he do to Miriam? He gives her leprosy. But he doesn't leave her that way, but he makes her cool her heels outside the tent for 7 days. Now, if you're like most women, and like me, the first day or two, good man, right? Up here in this desert, I'm doing all this myself, and I'm just as much of a prophet, and I'm the one that got leprosy. Aaron didn't get nothing, I'm the one that said, yeah, you can just see it. You see, for 2 days, she's probably going on. By day 3, she's feeling really bad. It sucks. I learned my lesson. Aaron feels horrible right away, because I think sometimes when you see someone else get punished for something that you did, it makes you feel worse, right? And he goes to Moses and he pleads with him and he says, please, please get God to forgive us. We were so foolish. And God hears him. She's restored. She's brought back in. We do a lot of foolish things, don't we? There's a lot of times that we belittle the gifts that God has given us. That's what the 12th chapter of Corinthians is all about. Right? We're the body. And the 13th chapter, everyone's given different gifts. It doesn't make one better than another. We are all part of the body. And that was clear back in Exodus and Numbers. God was saying the same thing. You are all part of me. Just follow me. Follow my ways. I'm going to make it easier for you. And if you could learn anything from all of his family, just trust God. When he says to do something, do it. Don't be jealous of somebody else. Just accept what he gives you. And there's no point in arguing and mumbling with your in-laws. He made them all part of the family. For a reason, whether we see it or not. And don't do something that's going to make God say, don't make me come down